Morning, Bluewater, and welcome to the Bluewater Backstage podcast. We are so glad that you are here for episode 4. My name's Tim. I am one of the pastors here at Bluewater Church in Sarnia, and I'm here with my good friend,
Scott.
We're glad that you are here. Thanks for joining us. We are, last week was such a fun podcast, and we knew there was going to be some interaction. And Scott, out of all 3 podcasts that we have done, we got the most interaction back from last week's podcast.
Yeah, definitely. Turns out this is something that not only we are thinking about and had some questions about, so that was fun to discuss and hear some of the feedback as well.
Okay, and we need to pick up from there a little bit because there was some things rumbling around that we did get a chance to get into the demon podcast about demons last week. But you told me about an experience that you had when you were in high school. I think you said, right? You have to tell that story here.
So we were talking about, obviously we've had some not funny, but actually real scary encounters that people at Bluewater have had. But I don't even know how this came up. Oh, it came up because in the account in I think it's in Luke. One of the synoptic gospel writers says that these guys are naked in the tombs or not wearing much. And that made me think of, for whatever reason, the legend of Underwear Man.
Okay. I grew up in Sarnia. I lived almost all my life in Sarnia, and I had never heard about Underwear Man, but this is a real thing. And so we have a not a huge community here in Sarnia.
Yeah.
I don't know who Underwear Man was or is. Maybe he comes to our church. I don't know. Maybe he's related to someone at our church. I don't know, but you have to tell the story.
He could be walking amongst us, and you'd never know, right? But the legend of Underwear Man was something I'd heard rumblings about in high school, and people had said that there was, this person who lived in Canatera Woods, Tarzan Land, who, if you summoned them with 3 claps at night, they would emerge from the forest. And
okay, this is demonic, right?
The first, as soon as I told you this story, that's the first thing you said. This is a demon. This is an underwear demon, and it's just so ridiculous. So anyway, one night I was driving back from my grandparents' place in Point Edward, and I had my mom in the car with me. And it was late at night, and I just said, "Mom, hold on 1 second. I need to find out the truth about something." And I didn't explain. I just drove into the park, and I parked the car, and I clapped 3 times, and a shadowy figure in underwear emerged from the trees just enough so the light would reveal them, and then slowly went back into the forest. And I realized this was real.
Underwear Man.
I summoned what I think was a human being, but Tim is convinced that this is a demonic experience, and just wanted you guys to know about that too, I guess.
Okay, if you're familiar with Underwear Man from right here in Sarnia, you need to let us know, because I'm still not entirely convinced that Scott's telling me the truth. The thing that he's got going in his favor is that we sat down to record here, and he asked Bob if Bob had heard of Underwear Man, and he had. So this is a real thing.
It's one of those things, until you've seen it, you will not believe it. Kind of like Beth claims she saw a cougar this past week, and I've been asking around, and it's one of those things, people nod politely along. Your dad was one of them, but he's like, this guy's crazy. This is not real.
Don't Google
in any way.
Do not Google that.
No. We're laughing about it. It's not funny. This is, I believe you went to jail, which is a good thing. You shouldn't do this. Yeah. And anyway.
Yeah. So I'm not saying anything about anything, but hanging out in your underwear in Canatera Park, waiting for people to clap so that you can step out of the bushes. That's not normal behavior. There's something else going on there.
Absolutely.
And, I'm not making any accusations for litigious reasons, but I would not be surprised if there was something happening there. Okay, the other thing we wanted to follow up on is the thing that seems to be on every child and junior high parents' lips right now is K-pop Demon Hunters. Now, I know you watched K-pop Demon Hunters and went through it with a fine-tooth comb. Give us your feedback on what K-pop Demon Hunters is all about.
I have never seen an episode of K-pop Demon Hunters, but I have heard much about it because it is very popular amongst the age group of my girls. And so I know there's very divided opinions about it. Some people are very sure this is, very dark, and it's not something we should be letting our kids consume, obviously, and influence them. And you've shared with me some Christian influencers who have kind of a different view on it as well, and kind of try to redeem and pick up some of the themes that do have some biblical connection. And it's a tough thing to weigh with our kids. My littlest Emmy sees all things, but especially theological things, as so black and white. When her friends have talked about this, she just said, "No, that's bad. Those are Satan's helpers." And she sees it that way. But I know it's a tough thing for parents right now to know how to navigate. So,
yeah, that's a real thing. So, full disclosure, I am also one of the people that has not seen this. That I am definitely not the demographic, and this is the kind of movie that I definitely would not and probably will not watch. But that's not going to stop you and me from talking authoritatively about it right here on the Backstage podcast. I've seen a few people talking about the fact or the idea that this that K-pop Demon Hunters might be a secretly Christian movie, which I think is interesting. Basically, the idea being that in so many children's movies nowadays, it's all that there's no actual bad guy. The bad guy is misunderstood, not actually bad. And in K-pop Demon Hunters, it's apparently, and I talked to Pastor Austin about this, who did watch it, and there's, he and I had some interesting back and forth about it, but the bad guys are actually demons, and they not only are they demons, but they have to die. Like there's no bad guys being redeemed. Like they all have to die. The quote that I heard that I thought was, it just kind of made me laugh, was like, they had to be killed like the Amalekites. Every single one of them got to be put to death. So
it is an interesting thing. And just from the little clips I've seen other people talking about it, like one of the, maybe we shouldn't say spoilers, but one of the spoilers is that one of the main characters is good, but actually is like kind of part demon. And I think they're trying to play on a theme of like, we all have a brokenness, and we can, but the end is like, light wins. And so it's one of those things where we have to use our discernment as Christians, right? Is even there's some themes here that are obviously speak to truth, but at what point should we try to redeem something if we feel a certain way about it, right? And so it is a tough thing, especially when kids just hear trends and hear songs which are so popular and they want to be all over it, right? But at the very least, it opens a door for us as Christian parents, right? Like it says, talk about the things of God when you sit and rise and walk by the way. And like these are conversations in the car about spiritual realm with our kids at an age appropriate level, and that's a cool thing to do too.
If you have kids in this age group, like I would just put it out there. This is probably something that you should be watching. This is probably something that whether or not you land on the place where your children could watch it, you definitely need to be conversant with it enough that you can actually interact with the ideas there. I think it's having portrayed for us ideas of shame, and then the hiding that shame, that is an important thing to process with our littles. And we can be kind of puritanical sometimes, and it's probably easier to be puritanical. And by that, I mean like, no, we're just not going to have Netflix. And by the way, I would be all for not having Netflix in your house. I don't have Netflix in my house. This is like, I think we need to be very careful about this stuff, but I do think we need to be able to interact and help our children, train our children to train their loves and loyalties so that they can know how to interact with these ideas. Because
over time, one day they're going to have to discern these things for themselves, right? And at the very least, the conclusion can be, hey, even though these are cartoons, like this isn't a joke. And there's some serious things to think about there for sure. Yeah.
Yep, there absolutely is. So that was last week, Jesus having authority over demons. This week, we are talking about Jesus having authority over death.
Should we just mention quickly about the idea of people praying through their home?
Absolutely.
This was so one of the things that was mentioned to both of us after we talked about this last week was people who feel a certain kind of tension or presence or being unsettled in their home, and asking, hey, will the elders of the church come and pray with us through the home? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. And is that a good and biblical thing to do? And what would you advise somebody in that case?
Absolutely. I think it's good and biblical. Let me tell you a quick story. When I was in high school, a bunch of us heard about I'm so embarrassed to say this, but a bunch of us heard about some on the night before Halloween, which is Devil's Night, right?
Well, that's what we called it as kids. Yep. I don't hear people say that anymore, but
okay, well, that's what I'm glad to hear that. But we heard there was going to be these Satanists in the cemetery on Michigan Avenue, whatever that cemetery is called. And so there's a larger story to this that I'll save for another time. But some of my friends walked around the edges of the cemetery and anointed the four corners of the cemetery with Mountain Dew.
Oh, wow.
So we might not do that.
Yeah, you can definitely just use olive oil from your house.
Absolutely. And you know what? I'm saying that, and it's kind of a joke and it's kind of funny, but like, this is a real thing, and this is really not something that we should be overly jokey about. If you have an experience of something in your home where you feel, as you say, unsettled, if you feel like there's an evil presence there, this is real stuff. And this is, I think, what we're hopefully walking away from last week's message with the real conception that this is real. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective, and we would love to, as elders, pray over your house, pray over your home, and
absolutely ask. Like that's an honor to do that, right? But at the same time, there's no magic in there. There's power in prayer of a righteous person, right? But if you know Jesus, you have by extension this authority over demons that you can claim through his name, not your own name, right? But that's the key, is like, do you know Jesus and have that authority? And we were just chatting, like, it brings to mind the story in Acts 19 of the sons of Sceva, who, there's these guys trying to cast out demons, and they're saying it. Let me just read it. I adjure you by the Jesus whom Paul proclaims. That's how they try to cast out the demon. And the demon in this man says, the evil spirit answered them, Jesus I know, and Paul I recognize, but who are you? And then they basically get the clothes beat off them.
Yep.
They get mastered by this guy, all of them. And it's kind of like, yeah, he's saying you don't get to sit in a seat that's not yours. You don't get to claim authority that you don't have if you don't know Jesus. Like, yeah, you're up against it in this, right? But if you do, you can claim his name over forces of evil. And we'll happily join you in that endeavor, though.
Absolutely. And man, that may be my favorite story in the Bible. And for the context, I think you said this, but just to make sure that we understand this, these were a bunch of Jewish guys that were exorcists by trade.
Yeah.
And they were going around casting out demons. And some of the demons were cast out in Jesus' name from these guys who weren't even Christians.
Right.
But not all of them. And it's remarkable. That guy was like, yeah, I know who Jesus is. I've heard of this Paul guy. Who in the world are you? And all 7 of them got beat up to the point where he sent them out bleeding and naked, I think is what the text says, right? Yeah. So, yep, this is not about us. It's not about what we have going for us at all. It is only and always about the authority of Jesus. And this morning we're talking about the fact that Jesus has authority over death. And we're going to pick up this story in Matthew chapter 9. I'll read it for you right now. Matthew chapter 9, starting in verse 18. While Jesus was saying this, a synagogue leader came and knelt before him and said, my daughter has just died, but come and put your hand on her and she will live. Jesus got up and went with him, and so did his disciples. Just then a woman who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak. She said to herself, if I only touch his cloak, I will be healed. Jesus turned and saw her. Take heart, daughter, he said, your faith has healed you. And the woman was healed at that moment. When Jesus entered the synagogue leader's house, he saw the noisy crowd and the people playing pipes. He said, go away, the girl is not dead, but asleep. But they laughed at him. After the crowd had been put outside, he went in, and interestingly, just like her father said, if you just come and put your hand on her, she will live. Jesus went in, he took the girl by the hand, and she got up, and news of this spread throughout that region. A pretty remarkable passage.
Amazing. I wonder if those people felt silly laughing at Jesus. That's always stood out to me from the story, that they laugh at him when he says that. But
yeah, I completely agree. So here's my question for you, Scott. I'm going to throw this to you and let you vamp on this a little bit. Why do you think we try so hard in our culture to insulate ourselves from the reality of death? Like it's something that we all face. And we have this weird bifurcation where we are completely fine seeing people on a screen getting mowed down by the thousands. And that doesn't seem to bother us at all. And yet in this weirdly reflexive way, I guess, is that the word I'm looking for? Yeah. We also insulate ourselves from the fact that death is a real thing.
Yeah, it's a real thing. It makes us feel all kinds of uncomfortable feelings, right? We don't, and I think anyone who's ever been to a funeral, like when you see death, like there's something in our guts, as I've heard you say, like that just tells us like, this isn't how it's supposed to be. Like we understand that this isn't natural as it seems. It actually isn't natural from a biblical perspective, right? And makes us feel big feelings. I think when you talk about, we didn't chat about this, but when you talk about people seeing death on the screen, we're fine with. But something that was so interesting about the Charlie Kirk's assassination was, I was meeting with several grown men through the week, tears in their eyes who have seen some things, but seeing a real person, if you were unfortunate enough to have seen the close-up, videos like in 4K actually have their life taken, like there's a shock to that was so unsettling for people and for a lot of reasons in this situation, right? But to see real violence up close was like, whoa, because we're really sheltered from the reality of death, or we try to be as much as we can. You're a hunter, as people will know from Sunday, of big game even, and I'm not. I've actually been mocked by kindergartners for not having hunted before. So I don't kill things, but you do, and a lot of us are so sheltered. We just want our meat to show up at the store in a package, but maybe in other times and cultures where you had to eat meat, they were a little more familiar with death in a lot of ways, right?
That's 100% true. And call me a hunter is a bit of an overstatement. I do once in a while hang out with hunters, but I'm not sure I am one. You have to tell us the story about getting made fun of by a kindergartner. This is just so great.
I feel like I've definitely shared this in the sermon, but our girls go to a country school, right? And so I was on a class trip, and a kid in SK who's decked out in camo came up to me like a 40-year-old man, and just looked me up and down and says, "Do you even hunt?" And I said, "You know what? I've never gone hunting in my life." And he says, "Wow, do you at least fish?" And I said, "Yes, I do, little boy." And he said, "Okay, good." And he walked away. I felt very judged. So,
well, it's a good thing you're a mighty fisherman.
Yeah, that's right.
That is fantastic. Yeah, man. We insulate ourselves from death in really weird ways, and this looms largely over what we're talking about Jesus having authority. I feel like I'm stepping on your toes here a little bit, but the reason is because if Jesus doesn't have authority over death, he can have authority over demons, and like that's great. But there's something bigger behind that. Jesus can have authority over nature, and that's fantastic.
Right.
But if he doesn't have authority over death, there's something behind that, something that looms larger over that as well.
And I mean, it's kind of like, I think you were saying, like, well, what are we even doing if he doesn't have authority over death? Paul talks about this in a passage we're going to read later, 1 Corinthians 15. Like, the summary is he's saying, what are we even preaching for? And our preaching's in vain, and your faith is in vain if Jesus is still in the grave, right?
That's right. So
like the whole deal rests on this historical, real fact of the resurrection, that Jesus does have authority over death. And if that can't be a thing, yeah, what are we hoping in? What are we doing?
That's exactly right. Now, as we work through the text, there's this very interesting thing where the synagogue leader Jairus, he comes to Jesus, falls at his feet. He's like, "My daughter is dead, and she's either dead or she's just about to die." And he's like, "If you just come and lay your hand on her, she will be healed." And Jesus is like, "All right, let's do it. Let's go." Mm-hmm. And then there gets to be this interruption, a very striking interruption. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this is the story of the bleeding woman, right? Which it's so interesting. In a lot of these passages we've been going through, it's just boom, 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 miracle after miracle. And oftentimes Jesus is very much in the middle of doing important things and gets interrupted. And even when the disciples want to shoo these people who they see as interruptions away. Like he stops and engages. He should be beelining to this house and doesn't see this woman as, this inconvenience. But yeah, it's crazy, right? Like she's text says 12 years she's been pursuing healing and all these doctors and money, and there's been nothing to heal her from her condition. And then, a second with Jesus is more powerful than 12 years of her own.
If I can just read the text from Mark, is that okay? So this is the interruption of Jesus healing Jairus' daughter. So this is Mark chapter 5, starting in verse 24. So Jesus went with Jairus. A large crowd followed him and pressed up around him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. And she had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors, had spent all that she had. Yet, instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I'll be healed. And immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized the power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," the disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" Like, Jesus, what? Like, there's a lot of people touching you. What's going on here? But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering."
It's awesome. I love how he calls her daughter, right? There's this personal care and interaction there. And, it's interesting. He can sense that power's gone out from him. That's a thing. And then also she has enough faith that she thinks just touching his robe, right, is the thing. And, there's like a desperation there on her behalf that we could learn from. Absolutely.
And this is something we talked about on Sunday, but I think it's worth revisiting right here, because it is such a powerful and potent thing that the reason why he pointed her out, like he could have just gone on with his day. He could have just gone on with his thing. There's a reason why he pointed her out. And for those of us who are thinking like, wow, I can't believe that he would be so unkind to pull this poor woman who had suffered all this and like point her out in front of everyone that he had healed her. Like, can't you just let her be healed on her own? But this is a glorious and wonderful thing that he did, because he was pointing out so that everyone knew that she was not unclean anymore.
Yeah.
She was healed, and everyone knew it because she was known as the woman who bled. Right?
Yeah,
she was known as unclean.
And we've talked about how big a deal that is, right? And on Sunday we do too, but he's showing for everybody like, hey, let's break the stigma. And now she's the lady who's been healed, right? And
Yep. So here's my question for you. Processing through this on my own, I have felt convicted that I am very regularly on my mission of what I need to accomplish. And listen, like between the two of us, we're fairly busy, right? Like we got stuff going on. And yet here we have Jesus, who had a lot more going on than we ever did or have or could. Mm-hmm. And yet he stops that. So it stops and has this moment with her where he heals her and then brings about a public acknowledgement that she has been healed. Talk to us about that and how we can apply that to our life.
That's so interesting, right? I think a lot of people who, I mean, again, yeah, we're busy. Everybody's busy, right? Different things for each of us. Life doesn't seem slow for almost any of us, I think, in a lot of ways. But for a lot of high capacity people, I think when we actually sit and try to imagine and work through the timeline of Jesus' ministry, it kind of makes us feel twitchy that he doesn't hustle more. You know, he actually doesn't move. Isn't there some kind of saying about that he's like the 3 mile per hour God or something, right?
Oh, yeah, that's great.
He
works at walking speed.
Yeah, he works at walking speed, and he doesn't see people as interruptions. And like, as hard as it is to say, like when we get super consumed with a task-driven mindset, like we can make the error of seeing people and even ministry opportunities, if they weren't on our schedule, as interruptions. And Jesus is like, that's just not a thing in his mindset at all, right? This is he goes out of his way to make it a teaching opportunity and a moment for this dear lady, right? So there's lots we can learn from that.
Would I be the priest in the parable of
Good Samaritan?
Good Samaritan, thank you.
Got places to be.
Yep. Would I be the priest that just crosses to the other side and keeps on going and I don't necessarily have a great answer to that. I like to think that I would be someone that helps, but yeah. Hey, let's bop into this next point. We're talking about death. We're talking about the reality of death. We're talking about how we routinely and regularly insulate ourselves from the reality of death. I think we also insulate our children from the reality of death.
Yeah.
So in the story, we have Jesus. He is going to heal this young girl, 12-year-old girl. He gets interrupted by this woman who he has this God moment with. He then goes and raises to life this young girl. But the fact is that she was dead. Mm-hmm. She was dead. She was dead as a doornail, dead. And we need to make sure that we are not insulating ourselves from the reality of death. That's a very unhealthy thing to do. We also need to process through that with our children. So do you have any tips for us about how we can, maybe even some suggestions of some resources that we can help ourselves to process through this reality and our children?
Yeah. I mean, I think, a lot of us try just not to think about it at all. And, we hope that for us and our house and our loved ones, that this isn't a thing that we have to walk through for as long as humanly possible. And we like to pretend that we're all going to get 90 plus years. And it doesn't take long to realize that's just not the reality. And, one of the things that I was so scared about in becoming a pastor was really dealing with death and walking with people who were dying and had loved ones die. And man, it doesn't matter if you have to do this as part of your vocation. All of us have to do that in our own lives and with the people we love and care about, because they're going to have loved ones that pass away. And so I think usually we don't think about this till we're sitting at a funeral and our mind races to, well, what if I was at a funeral of someone in my family, right? And we kind of think, should the kids come to a funeral if it's someone they don't know well, and we can just begin to expose them little by little. And I think I'm learning this. We've been learning this firsthand in the past year and a half as well, trying to walk with our kids through grief and loss in our family. And I think we make talking about stuff with our kids weirder. It's kind of like when I was talking with you and Val about talking about big topics with our kids, right? About how do you talk about sex and gender and all these things. And sometimes we just make it weird and the kids don't make it weird. And I think the same with death, right? We need to just talk about this as a real thing at their level for sure. But not bring an uncomfortability and an awkwardness to the conversation that they're not bringing to it.
Yep. Yeah. And I think you're hitting the nail squarely on the head. We need to be very careful, I think, with idioms in our culture. So we need to be careful with talking about someone who kicked the bucket, or they're 6 feet under, or even they passed away. There's all these things that we say that actually, no, that person died.
Right.
And this is the truth. So when we talk to our children, quick story, when my grandmother passed away, my children were quite young, and there was an open casket. So the top half of the casket was open, the bottom half wasn't. And it came time for, sort of the family to go up and pay their respects and whatnot. Even there you go. Pay their respects is an interesting verbal cue that we have for looking at someone and saying goodbye to someone who has died. Right. And so, my young children came up, and my mom had, I think she had my oldest son, Bryce, in her arms, and she said to him, "Grandma's sleeping." And I was so thankful for the undertaker, help me, the dude that worked at the funeral home.
Right. Yeah.
The word of which my brain's not braining today. The word is blanking. I'm blanking on, but he was like, no, she's not sleeping. She's dead.
That's what he said.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
And it set us all back a little bit. And he went on to explain, and this was a guy who loves the Lord. And he did the funerals for my grandmother and my grandfather, and I appreciated him so much and how he led our family through this process. Right. And he went on, he actually opened up the bottom of the casket.
Wow.
And so that the kids understood that, no, it's not half of grandma. The rest of grandma is here too. She's not sleeping. She's dead. And this is something that you need to healthily process through.
Yeah, that's interesting. Even in the language, how we'll do everything we can to kind of avoid facing the reality of it, right? And I mean, as Christians, we have better words, right? Like we say, like they're with the Lord, right? Yep. There's things that are true that we may say without the word dead, but it's an avoidance of the reality because it's painful, right? And some of the advice that we've got from friends with more experience than us in this is in terms of kids, because as we know, even as adults, we don't all handle grief the same way. Yeah. And for us, like even just our girls, both of them handle loss very differently. And there's, I think for parents, sometimes a sort of a feeling of pressure that I need to see a certain response in them or they don't understand. And it's okay if one is bawling, and one is okay to go right back to school. And the advice that we were given is really to let the kids kind of take the lead and in their questions and their feelings about it, instead of, as a parent, you want to sit down and talk through everything right then and get to the bottom of it. And, we're still getting questions all the time on a very random basis about these realities. And man, there's something that moves you though about your kids talking about heaven, and they see it so without the weight and baggage that adults sometimes do. And, just to hear them be like, oh man, to hug Jesus, that'd be the greatest day ever. It's just like, oh wow. Like we can learn a lot from them sometimes too, in the way they see it.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. We are doing something in light of this, in light of the fact that death is a reality and that grief is a reality, and mourning, mourning, that's a reality too. We're doing something this Christmas to help people process through this. We've never done anything like this before. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, so I think this was your idea, and I think is a great one, this Blue Christmas, which I've never been part of a service like that before, but the idea...
Neither have I.
No? Okay, well, we get to figure this out then. The idea is just that Christmas is a complicated time for people, right? As any holiday is, and not all of us are, I now can't make fun of people that put their trees up at the beginning of November because I've succumbed to this, but not with joy. So not all of us have great feelings of joy at Christmas, right? And I think the big thing is it can be painful, especially if we've lost someone, or even if you have lost someone and you didn't have good relationships. Sometimes you mourn what you wish you had. That you didn't actually get to lose. And that's a complicated thing too, but you can feel both. Right. You can, there's elements of Christmas that will be difficult for us this year, and there's a weight to that. And there's also all kinds of joy, and Christmas Day will be, a great day too. So you can feel both. And I think if we're honest, most of us feel both if we've lived enough years, right? There's a weight to both. Yeah, there is. I know for myself. So Christmas, I personally don't have much in the way of bad feelings about. It's mostly a joy for me. However, for me, it's Mother's Day. That's a challenge. Is that the word for it? And because my mom passed right around Mother's Day. So depending on the year, it's like either on Mother's Day or like a day before or after or whatever. So I just told you a few years ago, that's the deal. I'm just not going to be preaching Mother's Day. I'm just not going to do it. You're going to be doing it. And that doesn't mean that I don't love Mother's Day as well. Yeah. Or want to celebrate moms or whatever. Absolutely. It's a both. Yep. The mom of my children and the moms of my grandchildren. And there's a whole lot of awesomeness about moms there, but I'm just not going to be speaking that day. And we have a lot of feelings about that. Similar to that, maybe around Christmas as well. And that's okay. It is. I think we sometimes feel as Christians, you can't be sad. And Jesus, I think, does some awesome modeling for us in that, he's kind of the funeral interrupter. There's a few stories like this. Yep. And he brings life where there was death. But he cries, right? He mourns the death of a friend. And so it's not like he doesn't care that we're sad, and it's okay to be sad, even as Christians, but we aren't sad for the person we've lost if they know Christ. That's right. We're sad for us. And we don't want to stay there forever. And there's whole layers of stuff to think about, and there's joy to be had as well. But, he cares, right?
He does.
About those
And not all
feelings.
tears are sadness, or at least they're not all sadness, right? Like we can grieve, we can cry, but as those who have hope, and that's a real thing. So listen, we have, as we start to land this plane a little bit, what are some recommendations that you have for, that we can sort of put out there in the ether for people who want to start to process through this in their own lives, or maybe even with their children?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is something that I'm trying to read more about lately. So trying to build a list of those types of books that could be helpful. But two that come to mind in particular are one I know that you're really familiar with too, and it's not really a book in the way, it's a collection of liturgies, right? So it's called Every Moment Holy. And it's a series of books, but book 2 is about death and grief and loss and hard things. And man, there's just something about it. It has been incredibly helpful to me pastorally, but certainly if you don't work in vocational ministry, it could be as well, just to know what to say when you're walking with people through hard things. But there's some thing about the way some of those liturgies are written that just put words to feelings that we have a hard time, verbalizing, that are just so beautiful and so moving and encouraging. So that's one that was recommended to me at Stronger Conference that we went to is called We Shall All Be Changed by Whitney Pipkin, I think is her last name. And it's not like a theology book. There is theology woven in there, but it's more just her experience with grief and loss as a Christian. And again, same thing. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but that one really kind of encouraged me, and I would recommend that. I don't know
I'll throw one out as well, because it's not all just a matter of processing through death after death has happened in our sphere. We also want to live in such a way that death is that we can die well, right? If we live well, we'll die well. And so my favorite living author is a guy named N.D. Wilson, and he has a book. If you've heard me talk much at all, you will have heard me talk about death by living. And the subhead of the title is Life is Meant to be Spent. And I've read that book a number of times. I'm reading through it chapter by chapter with my nephew right now, my high school nephew. And it's impacting me so deeply again, even though I've read it a whole bunch of times. And as we hold this out to you, man, your life is a commodity. Your life, your days, your hours, your minutes, this is what we have. We don't all have the same amount of money. We don't all have the same amount of skill. We don't all have the same amount of talent. We don't all have the same amount of relationships. What we do have is this minute. And when we intentionally spend our lives on purpose for the Lord, then we can be happy with. Sorry, you look like you're going to say something.
No, that's good.
This is bad podcasting.
The way that we live should be framed by the fact that we will die, right? It's not something to bury our heads in the sand over and just make all kinds of plans for living it up one day in retirement age and all this stuff. And the reality is we are not promised a certain length of days, and there's a lot of people who died with an RV in their driveway with all kinds of plans for retirement, and weren't living in light of death. And so you're going to hit me, but I haven't read that book yet, and so I need to. Sounds
I need
awesome.
to buy you a copy.
Yeah.
It is so good. Well, friends, we are so thankful that you have chosen to spend some time with us. If you are this deep into this podcast, thank you. Thank you from the bottom of our heart. We are so glad that you would choose to spend some time with us. And I thought as we close, it would be good to read some scripture together. So 1 Corinthians chapter 15, starting in verse 50, 1 Corinthians 15, starting in verse 50 says this: I declare to you, brothers and sisters, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable. Listen, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. In a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. For the perishable must clothe itself with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality. When the perishable has been clothed with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality, then the saying that is written will come true: death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God, he gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. Thanks, friends. My name's Tim.
I'm Scott.
Have a great day. You're left.